The aerial theatre in Ukraine has been hotly contested, even without Russia and Ukraine making extensive use of fighter jets. Russia fires volleys of missiles, bombs and drones. Ukraine defends itself with anti-air systems, most notably the Patriot. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has been pretty happy about this situation. Yes, Ukraine had Patriots capable of destroying many of Putin's missiles and drones, but it didn't have enough of them. Until now. Putin now must feel a sense of betrayal as the US prepares to approve the sending of a new Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. And the worst of it, at least for Russia's leader, is that the transfer may be going ahead against US President Donald Trump's wishes. On May 4, the New York Times reported that Ukraine was on the verge of getting more help from its allies in its war against Russia. That help is coming in the form of at least one Patriot air defense system in a delivery that had previously gone completely unreported. The news must have come as a shock to Putin, as he stepped up his missile campaigns in Ukraine over the last few weeks. The idea that Ukraine is not only receiving a new defense system, but one that's been the bane of Russia's aerial strategy for so long is a game changer. But here's the kicker. The Patriot isn't coming from the United States. In fact, the current Trump administration may not have even known about it before it was too late to stop the transfer. As the Times of Israel reported on May 4, Ukraine's new Patriot system is going to arrive in Ukraine by way of Israel. The system will likely be one of the older Patriot models that Israel previously decommissioned. The outlet says that Israel plans on refurbishing the Patriot to bring it back to working order before shipping it off to Ukraine. This all makes sense, at least from the Israeli perspective. It's no stranger to supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia, having previously sent 90 Patriot interceptor missiles to Poland so they could be passed on to Ukraine. Patriots also aren't as important to Israel as they are to Ukraine. The country is currently in the process of decommissioning all of its Patriots as it prepares to replace them with more advanced aerial defenses to supplement the powerful Iron Dome that surrounds Israel. For Israel, this donation is a chance to offload systems it no longer uses, at the cost of minor refurbishment, rather than being forced to mothball or spend money on getting rid of its Patriots altogether. The fact that the Patriots will help Ukraine fight against a country that's allied with Israel's main enemy, Iran, is a nice little bonus. But it's a bonus that the Trump administration may not have known was going to be coming to Ukraine. Speaking to the New York Times on condition of anonymity, several US officials have suggested that the order to send more Patriots to Ukraine may not have come from Trump. Instead, the delivery could be a follow-up on orders made by former President Joe Biden during his tenure. The officials refused to provide any comment on Trump's opinion of the decision, which is almost as damning as outright saying that Trump doesn't approve. Why wouldn't Trump approve? Sending Patriots to Ukraine now runs counter to his constant attempts to negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia. The White House's National Security Council practically said as much when asked about the details of the transfer, stating simply that President Trump has been clear he wants the war in Ukraine to end and the killing to stop. That's why Putin may feel so betrayed by the arrival of new Patriots in Ukraine. If the US wants the war to end, Putin may contend, then what's it doing by allowing Ukraine's allies to provide it with more of a US-made weapons system that has caused serious problems for Russia? Of course, that view is self-serving. Putin certainly would have been happy with the alternative of Ukraine having fewer aerial defenses, so he could continue his relentless campaign of aerial aggression. The US Defense Department offered another hint that Trump may have nothing to do with his most recent Patriot transfer. It highlighted that the US continues to provide equipment to Ukraine from previously authorized defense packages, says the New York Times. Translation: the Patriot coming from Israel was likely approved by the Biden administration long before Trump took office. The news gets even worse for Putin. As Israel prepares a Patriot for Ukraine, it looks like Europe may soon follow suit. A day after the New York Times report, Reuters shared details about how more of Ukraine's Western allies are talking about sending several more Patriots to Ukraine. those talks are getting serious. Ukraine's European allies apparently wanted to reach an agreement, both among themselves and with the US, to transfer more of the valuable weapons to Ukraine ahead of the NATO summit scheduled to be held at the end of June. If those discussions bear fruit, Ukraine could receive at least one more Patriot from Greece. Ukraine's European allies have also identified the US as a potential provider of even more of the systems, though it's unclear whether Trump would approve given his push for peace. The New York Times reported something similar, stating that Ukraine's Western allies are discussing the logistics of Germany or Greece giving another one, in its report about the Patriots arriving from Israel. So, a lot is going on here, all of which hurts Putin. Ukraine is going to get more Patriot missile systems. The significance of that will become clear in just a moment. However, Trump's refusal to comment on the situation is more damaging for Russia than Putin would like the world to believe. While Russia may try to frame that lack of comment as Trump disapproving the transfer of a new Patriot, and it may be right, it also can't hide from the fact that Trump hasn't outright condemned the move. The US president may be angry that this situation seems to be out of his control, but he's not so angry that he's willing to appear to be supporting Russia by pulling approval for the Patriot to be transferred. That hurts Putin. It's a gut shot amidst all of Russia's attempts to manipulate the US into taking an anti-Ukraine stance. Even as the US prepares to approve the delivery of a new Patriot system that Trump appears not to have approved, it also isn't saying anything about the situation that Russia could use it to its advantage. As for Ukraine, there's one big takeaway from this news. It's getting at least one new Patriot. And that's massive for Ukraine for several reasons, starting with the sheer power that the Patriot aerial defense systems deliver to the country. Patriot is such a threat to Russia because it combines mobility with the ability to launch multiple missiles simultaneously to devastate incoming aerial threats. Each Patriot system comes with an M901 launching station, which is used both to transport the system's missiles to Ukraine's desired location and launch them once they arrive. Each of these stations can carry up to 4 PAC-2 missiles or as many as 16 PAC-3 missiles, both of which are more than powerful enough to shred through practically any missile or drone Russia sends Ukraine's way. Those missiles aren't just powerful, they're also supremely accurate. Each one is loaded with a track-via missile guidance system that allows it to make mid-course corrections when it's en route to a target. Further guidance is provided by operators working in a mobile engagement control center, who combine with the Patriot's automated tracking systems to pick out specific targets for the system to engage. Each Patriot missile has a range of about 43.5 miles and can reach altitudes of more than 14.9 miles, making them capable of destroying an incoming threat long before that threat reaches its intended target. Once the Patriot missiles find their target, they unleash 198 pounds of explosive fury from a warhead situated just behind the missile's terminal guidance system. Ukraine can deploy these missiles quickly. Army recognition says that the minimum time for arming the missile is just 9 seconds, though that time can expand to 3.5 minutes depending on the situation. The PAC-3 variant of the Patriot's missiles is the most effective, at least from a Ukrainian perspective. They afford Ukraine the ability to launch 16 missiles at once from a single launcher, with each of those missiles also capable of hitting individual targets or bunching up to take out a larger threat. These missile variants were deemed 100% effective by the US thanks to their use during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and they're now the standard deployed within the US and to all Patriot users. Now, the sheer importance of the Patriot's mobility shouldn't be underestimated. Each Patriot missile container is loaded onto M860 semi-trailers, which are then towed by a heavy expanded mobility tactical truck or HEMT. There are several variations of these HEMT trucks, and it's unknown which Ukraine is currently using. However, it almost doesn't matter. The point of these trucks is that Ukraine can use them to transport a Patriot to whatever region it feels needs to be defended against an incoming Russian missile barrage. As importantly, when the Patriot has done its job, Ukraine can then transport it quickly to an undisclosed location. That functionality makes it incredibly difficult for Putin's forces to destroy Patriot launchers. By the time Russia has identified where a Patriot is located in Ukraine, often as a result of the Patriot taking out some of Russia's missiles, the launcher is already on the move. Add to all of this a complex command and control vehicle that combines the launcher station, a control station, and several radars and antennae used for tracking, and you get one of the world's most impressive aerial defense systems. It's not the most advanced, that much is clear from Israel's current efforts to replace its Patriots with new systems. However, it's more than capable of dealing with most of the Soviet-era missiles and bombs, along with the more modern drones that Russia is using against Ukraine. That power alone would be enough to anger Putin. However, it's also worth considering what the Patriot represents in terms of the level of support every donation showcases for Ukraine. A single Patriot system costs around $1 billion to build and needs 90 soldiers to operate fully. For Putin, that means the US has just approved the transfer of an extremely expensive system it could have used for itself. Plus, the requirement for 90 troops to operate a Patriot demonstrates just how much training must have been provided to Ukraine by its Western allies. Patriots are also scarce. So scarce that every transfer of a Patriot to Ukraine eats into a supply of just 186 of the systems that are in operation worldwide. About a third of those systems are owned and operated by the United States. Another 40 are owned by European countries, which includes many of the Patriots that were already in Ukraine before Israel announced it will be delivering another. That scarcity is another reason why Putin will be so angry that another Patriot is heading to Ukraine. These aren't weapon systems that are easy to get a hold of. Even now, the US has to provide direct approval for the transfer of any Patriot system from one country to another, even if that transfer doesn't involve the US directly. In other words, Israel may be donating the Patriot to Ukraine, but it's the US that has to say yes for that donation to happen. Ukraine will be happy the yes came, even if Trump didn't provide it himself. Why? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has long touted the Patriot as one of the most important weapons Ukraine has in its fight against Russia. That much was clear back in April 2024, when Zelenskyy was appealing to Ukraine's allies to send more of the weapons to his country. At the time, Ukraine's president said he needed at least 7 Patriots to provide Ukraine with adequate defenses against Russia's aerial onslaught. Putin must be brought down to earth, and our sky must become safe again, Zelenskyy said in an appeal to NATO members, as he also claimed that the level of foreign support Ukraine was receiving was very limited compared to the threat Russia posed. And it depends fully on your choice, the choice whether we are indeed allies. The impassioned plea didn't immediately lead to an outpouring of further support that included Patriots for Ukraine. It couldn't. The systems are in short supply, as mentioned earlier, meaning Ukraine's allies couldn't just give away Patriots without considering how doing so would weaken their own defenses. However, Zelenskyy also had a point in terms of how Ukraine's stockpiles of Patriots at the time weren't enough. In the first 4 months of 2024 alone, Russia pelted Ukraine with almost 1,200 missiles, more than 1,500 drones, and around 8,500 of its glide bombs, as support for Ukraine seemed to slow down. Faced with such a massive barrage, Zelenskyy could only say, "We are telling this directly. To defend, we need 7 more Patriots or similar air defense systems, and it's a minimum number." In other words, the more of these systems Ukraine could get its hands on, the better. Fast forward about a year, and Zelenskyy was still making the point that Ukraine needed more Patriots. Only this time, he took a different approach to getting his hands on the anti-air systems. On April 14, Zelenskyy participated in an interview with 60 Minutes, where he said that his country was ready to buy 10 Patriot systems directly from the United States. Failing that, Ukraine was also willing to spend money to secure licensing rights, allowing it to build the weapons system domestically. Zelenskyy told 60 Minutes that Ukraine had earmarked $15 billion for the purchase, meaning money would be no barrier. Unfortunately, the offer fell on deaf ears. Zelenskyy acknowledged this himself during the interview, saying, "But the United States says there are no opportunities today, but at the same time they are transferring such systems, for example, to Israel." Ironically, it's now Israel that's coming to Ukraine's aid. Zelenskyy may not have been able to secure the purchase of 10 Patriots directly from the United States. However, the Patriot it's about to receive from Israel may have been cast aside precisely because the US was transferring new systems to Israel. It's strange how seemingly unrelated transactions can end up being more beneficial to Ukraine than anybody might have thought. Today, Ukraine is in a slightly better position with Patriot systems than it was when Zelenskyy was calling for 7 of them in 2024. It had 8 of the systems before Israel announced the transfer of another, though only 6 of those 8 are believed to be operational. The other 2 are being refurbished, according to the US, with their return to the battlefield potentially combining with the one from Israel and perhaps one from Greece or Germany to bring Ukraine's stockpiles up to 10. Zelenskyy will have his minimum Patriot present, and he's going to need it. After all, another reason why this most recent confirmation of a Patriot transfer is so important is that Russia has stepped up its aerial attacks against Ukraine as we head deeper into 2025. Just look at a couple of recent incidents to see the proof. For instance, April 13 saw Russia launch a devastating missile strike against the Ukrainian city of Sumy. The attack included a pair of Iskander missiles that struck Ukraine at 10:15 AM local time, hitting areas around the city state university and its Congress Center. The aerial assault was devastating. At least 34 people, almost all civilians, were killed in the attack, which also injured another 117, including 15 children. A little over 10 days later, Putin was at it again. This time, he launched a ballistic missile at the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, killing 13 and injuring another 90 in the process. That attack prompted Trump to decry Putin's actions, with the US president posting "Vladimir, stop" in the immediate aftermath of the attack. Trump later said that the attack makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war, he's just tapping me along. The Kyiv attack was part of a larger aerial strike that saw Russia target Ukraine with 70 missiles and 150 attack drones in just a few hours. Moving deeper into 2025, it's attacks like these against Ukraine civilians that are becoming more intense. Combine them with other attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure and military facilities, and it's clear what the arrival of a new Patriot system means. It's one more defensive weapon Ukraine can use to mitigate the damage Russia is causing. Civilians' lives may be saved thanks to Israel's donation. If more Patriots end up arriving in Ukraine, Putin will find it much harder to terrorize the country's citizens as part of his twisted war plans. Putin may feel betrayed, but the reality is that he's bringing all of this on himself. If he wasn't attacking Ukraine's people from the skies, Ukraine wouldn't need more Patriot systems. But Russia's leader won't accept that simple fact. The US-approved transfer of a new Patriot is an affront to everything he wants to achieve. Still, Putin might soothe his anger with a possibility, no matter how slight that possibility may be. Trump may decide to prevent further Patriot transfers in the future. Remember that the Trump administration appears to have nothing to do with Israel's most recent transfer outside of being the administration that's in power when the transfer is made. The approval likely came from Biden. Could Trump withdraw that approval? It's possible, though very unlikely for a couple of reasons. The first is simple. Trump doesn't want to be seen as sympathetic to Russia at this moment in time. Putin's recent airstrikes have shown him that Putin isn't a man of his word. Withdrawing a Patriot that the US already agreed to send to Ukraine would now offer fuel for Trump's opposition to accuse him of being a Russian asset. The second reason Trump won't say no to this or potentially future Patriot transfers is that he appears to have woken up to the true threat that Putin presents. Over the last few weeks, the US appears to have strengthened its ties to Ukraine. Trump and Zelenskyy met with each other on April 26 during the funeral of Pope Francis at Vatican City. Talks that Zelenskyy labelled as the best yet to take place between the two world leaders. Days later, the US and Ukraine confirmed they finally agreed to a minerals deal, placing US support even more firmly behind Ukraine. That deal also says that the US will ensure there's a possibility that more weapons shipments will be made to Ukraine if Putin doesn't agree to a peace deal. Putin is being forced to face up to the fact that he might not have the US on his side anymore. Israel's Patriot transfer is just one part of a wider trend that sees the US backing away from its past support of Russia under Trump. But it's a massive part. Ukraine will soon have another Patriot, perhaps even 2 of Germany, Greece, or the US decide to heed the call to send more before the June NATO summit. It won't be long before those new weapon systems are put to work repelling Putin's intensifying missile and drone assaults. But what do you think about the US approving the transfer of another Patriot system to Ukraine? What does the Trump administration's refusal to comment on the transfer really mean? And how important will that new Patriot be to Ukraine? Tell us your opinions in the comment section, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date insights into the latest Ukraine war development.